Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. Dr. Weinhold, how are you today?
I'm grateful, but I see you have a very authentic background behind you here.
I do. This is real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fully, I'm outside right now in my backyard, and I love it. There's a fence over here.
Oh yeah.
And so it's nice. Yeah, I like it. It's not a green screen greenery. It's a real. I'm really authentically in the backyard today. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Had a very busy week. Lots of clients. One suicidal client, and that was a little bit of a stress. But looks like he's coming through okay.
Well, that's good. That's good to know. Obviously, we wish him well, him or her well. So, what do we have today? Because we're speaking about hard subjects. We got some hard subjects all month long, but important ones. That hopefully we can take and think about all summer long and reflect so that maybe we can make a change by the time kids get back to school. What are we talking about this month?
Well, in the last month or two, I've been talking about mass shootings and who are these mass shooters? How are they raised? They're almost all men. And so it's like, how do we raise boys to become mass shooters? And now I'm going to zero in on school shootings and school shooters because I know a lot about that. I've made it my business to study a lot of the dynamics of school violence and school shootings, and started with the Columbine tragedy back in April 20th, 1999, and shocked everybody, shocked the world. Actually, it's really everything is marked from Columbine, and so there have been 380 school shootings since Columbine. But I want to talk about the Columbine tragedy because I studied it probably as deeply as anybody I know. There was a lot to it that kept not being in the mainstream media. I had to go to some underground media and some internet media and different things to find various pieces of the Columbine tragedy. And then I was kind of thinking, well, how do I put that all together that makes an impact? Well, do I write a book about it? No, it didn't seem like it. Do I do a video a presentation on it? No, that isn't it. It has to be interactive, I thought. So I'm at the symphony in Colorado Springs, up in the balcony, listening to Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, which is one of my favorite pieces. And I'm just kind of carried away with the music, and I'm thinking about how do I do this with this Columbine information I have? And suddenly it hit me. It has to be a live play because that's the only way that it's dramatic enough and real enough that people will get it. And so I came home from the symphony and sat down and wrote a draft of the play. It's called A Rush to Judgment, the trial of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. And it's based on the premise that the two boys don't die at the tragedy, which they did, but they're captured and put on trial. And so what I found was that, in my research, there was just so many things that I called them the whole thing. When I looked at the whole thing, it was like a perfect storm. That this is what's happening in this high school, and all these different factors are coming together at the same time to make this happen. So I began to think about how to put that into a play. So basically, the play is it's a two-act play. There's the first act is the witnesses for the prosecution, and there are four witnesses that testify. And then the second act is the witnesses for the defense. Then here's the unique part of it. After we finish with seeing the play, the audience gets to ballot as if it were the jury. And it gets to say, okay, now that you've witnessed this play, do you think these boys are guilty or not guilty? And in the defense side of the ledger, the argument is that when they committed the crime, they did not know the difference between right and wrong. And that's called the McNaughton rule in legal terms. And it's what's decided in many cases when a defendant doesn't seem to be able to know the difference between right and wrong when they committed the crime. And so that's the defense from the attorneys for the two boys. And the prosecution, of course, brings witnesses to show the effects of what they did and how people reacted to what they did. So it's interesting. Every time I've had the play presented, I never got a unanimous decision by the audience one way or the other. It was pretty mixed. And in many cases, it was 50-50. And so it was a powerful set of facts that I presented that I had gathered from all my research. And so let me put up on the screen the perfect storm. I want to show these are the kind of things that I found that made a difference in terms of this Columbine shooting. These two boys, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were bullied every day at school. When they came to school, and they may have provoked some of this, but every day at school, when they enter the school, there was a gauntlet, mostly of student athletes, and they threw eggs at them. They threw all kinds of food at them, yelled at them, screamed at them, called them names. They had to run through this gauntlet to get into school. And this number two, then the school knew about this and did nothing to stop it, absolutely nothing. And there were many bystanders that witnessed it, and they did nothing to stop it. They didn't go to the defense of these two boys. They just sort of laughed it off, like, "Oh, boys will be boys, and this is what they're having fun with." And they didn't see how awful this was and what effect this might have on these two boys. Also, the two boys earlier in their life, about a year or so before the shooting, they were arrested for theft. And basically, the sheriff did nothing to them, put them on probation with no consequences, basically. And so an opportunity to intervene was missed every day at school. It was missed years ago when the sheriff did nothing to deal with them and what was going on. And then in the year before the shooting, and I don't know exactly when they started, maybe in the fall, Harris got on an antipsychotic drug. He was prescribed by a psychiatrist he saw. And so that was a big factor in this, in terms of the McNaughton rule, because 5 days before the shooting, the Marine recruiter came to his house and met with his parents and basically said that he can't join the Marines and until he has cleared this drug out of his system for 6 months. And he was devastated. because he had his whole plan after high school was to enlist in the Marines, and he was really excited about that. And suddenly his dream was shattered. And so what he did, without reading the label on the bottle of pills he was taking, he went cold turkey. He stopped taking the drug immediately after right after the recruiter left. And that's the worst thing you can do because you need to titrate off this drug. Or if you do, it says right on the label if you go cold turkey on the drug, it can cause psychotic behaviors. I mean, it says that right on the label. But he didn't do that because of his strong desire to get free of this drug as soon as possible so he could join the Marines. So there was another missed opportunity to intervene, and also another reason why it might be possible that he was having psychotic episodes at the time he had did the shooting. Then also the two boys actually wrote violent essays in their English class, and the teachers ignored them. It was a clear danger signal that these boys were disturbed. I mean, they should have called the parents in at that point and said, "Hey, your kids are displaying a lot of passive violence through these essays that they're writing." And a lot of the essays were essays about uh, getting revenge on all the kids that were bullying them every day. And so, I mean, there were just clear signals that should have been paid attention to and weren't. And the boys were heavily involved in the Gothic culture. They basically wore black trench coats to school, and that was part of the Gothic dress at the time. And they also listened to the music of Rammstein, which is a dark metal group from Germany. Lots of death in the lyrics and lots of violence in the lyrics. So it was clear that they had begun to develop, going down a fairly deep rabbit hole of basically leading to a culture of total almost nihilism and also total violence. And so there was lots of time that somebody could have noticed that. Somebody could have said, "Hey, this is a possible red flag for these kids that they're so involved in the dark side and so involved in death and destruction and violence." So the other thing that happened then was they built their weapons in the basement of their home. Now, any parent that would be at all attentive to what their teenage boys are doing or would have certainly noticed that, but they didn't. The parents completely ignored and had no idea that they were putting together weapons to use to shoot up the Columbine High School. And they also stored their weapons and ammo in their bedroom. And again, no parental involvement happened at that time. And then finally, the day that they went to Columbine High School to kill these people, shoot up the place, they had their weapons in their backpack, and the butt of the gun that they used stuck out of the backpack. And they went right by their parents, and the parents didn't notice. So, I mean, it's like so many opportunities to stop this from happening, to prevent it from happening, were there. And I looked at all of them, and I thought, my God, this is probably a very typical way that this kind of behavior, this violent behavior, is handled. It's ignored, and people see it. They may laugh at it. They think, oh, these guys are just, trying to get attention and not have any kind of long-term effects on them. But certainly in some of the writings that Eric Harris did and some of the writings that Dylan Klebold did showed that these boys were extremely affected by the bullying and the put downs that they experienced every day at school, and nobody came to their defense. Nobody came and said, "Hey," nobody protected them from what was happening. and so they basically took everything into their own hands and decided that they're going to shoot up the school, which was a last resort. I mean, I'm a therapist. I also train school counselors. A good school counselor could have talked to them and maybe also seen that they needed some help. They needed some help in dealing with their violent behaviors, but that didn't happen either. So anyway, it's clear that this was like a perfect storm. All those things happening at the same time with the same group of people, the same two boys, and the result was a huge school shooting at Columbine on April 20th, 1999. Every April 20th, there's some kind of a remembrance in the state here in Colorado of because Columbine High School, it was in Littleton, Colorado, and it's about maybe 60 miles from where I live. And I was asked after the fact to uh, present a program that might prevent this from happening in the future, which I did. And we were going to really install the program not only in the high school, but in the elementary and middle schools in that district. And unfortunately, they decided not to do that. And instead, they had collected a lot of money. A lot of people sent in money after the shooting. Uh, as often happens, is they had a fund that was created to handle all those funds. And mostly what they used them for, which was good, I can't fault them for that, is they used them to provide counseling for the students and faculty uh, to deal with the post-traumatic stress that they had during the shooting. And so it was really there was a lot of money in this fund and could have easily funded this program, but again, the school people just didn't see how they didn't want to see how they contributed to this, and they didn't want to have a program that was designed to correct some of their behaviors uh, be installed in their school district. So it was some denial, and there was apparently a panel of people who decided how the money was spent. But I mean, our program that I had, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is. It's called the Kind and Safe Schools Initiative, and it's one that I've developed and have used in over 700 schools around the country. And we were modifying it a bit for the district's needs, but it was pretty much the same program. And actually, in terms of the kinds of things that also were in the background is that, and this is important, I think, in all looking at all school shootings, is basically as a psychologist, I know that what you pay attention to is what you get more of. And so if you pay attention to negative things in the environment, you're going to get more of them. And sometimes you need to pay some attention to them, but basically, if you paid attention to pro-social behavior, you would get more pro-social behavior in the school. That was my hypothesis after, looking at what B.F. Skinner said about how what you pay attention to, you reinforce inadvertently and then get more of that. And I saw many examples of that. Right after Columbine, there was the biggest and the most prevalent way that people handled it was a no tolerance policy. So if anybody had any kind of behavior that scared people or that caused some problems, they were immediately kicked out of school. And that was how they dealt with it. And it surely did not solve the problem. First of all, second of all, most of school violence is not caused by school shootings. It's caused by everyday bullying and put downs that students have to deal with. In my research, I researched in elementary and middle schools mostly, because they were the ones where the issues were more prevalent. And what I found was that most students, average student, receives about 30 put downs a day. I mean, that's a negative experience. And certainly that does not lead them to feel safe and comfortable at school. And even teachers would participate in these. They would add in put downs of their own. So it seemed as if there was a culture of violence that had developed in the school toward it was like peer violence. And then also about 80% of kids uh, reported that they had been bullied in some way during the time they were in school. And actually, the statistics are that about 10% of the kids who drop out of school is because they don't feel safe. And they drop out for safety reasons, not for any other reason. Because they're being bullied and they're being put down, and the school's not doing anything to protect them. So the teachers, the school officials, in trying to figure out how to deal with this, they went to some extremes that didn't really solve the problem. Like they put in metal detectors. Well, that only took care of those people coming from the outside and did not take care of the day-to-day kind of peer violence that was occurring in their school. They totally ignored that. And so it really became very clear to me that in order for kids to learn in the school, there are two things that have to happen. And if these aren't there, it's likely that the learning is going to be affected. The first thing is they have to feel safe. And back in 1950, James Coleman did a report for the Department of Education. He was a professor at University of Maryland. And one of his key conclusions was exactly that the most important thing for schools to do to increase and provide an atmosphere for learning was to make sure that their schools were safe. And if you didn't have a safe school, learning was affected greatly. So that was really a finding that went way back to 1950 when that came out. And we knew that all this time. This was a report that everybody read and nobody did anything about it. And then the second thing is obviously if you're in an environment where you're being teased, put down, and negative things thrown at you, that's not a conducive environment for learning. And so I've said if schools are going to be a place where kids learn, they have to be kind and they have to be safe. And that led me to start and create a curriculum to make that happen. And I'll talk in one of my later episodes this month about what that curriculum looks like and what effect then it had on schools, because we did a lot of research on how effective was this program. And it turned out to be very effective. And I'll talk more about that. So that's about it for today, Ben. I wanted to talk about the perfect storm. You have any questions about this?
I don't. Well, first of all, let me let me get you big there on screen. Uh, I mean, I think that it's fascinating. I have like, I would love to read the play. I have a theater background, and I would absolutely love to read the play. I think that it's if you know the warning signs and you can help get kids help, then that's something. And also like one thing that I think was very clear in your stuff is the old saying, it takes a village,
Yeah, right.
and and it's all of these all of these situations and all of these missed opportunities to help, and that's what people need is help.
And I was surprised that no one got their arms around the big picture about Columbine. And
Yeah.
I don't I didn't I read everything that was written about it, and everybody would focus in on one of the 14 elements of the perfect
Yep.
storm, but ignore the others.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's and the scariest part is that we know that this happens every single day across the country
Right.
with kids that never do anything like this, and then and then it just takes the one situation where it's the perfect storm, and it's the right stuff inside them. So it's really eye opening, and I think it's a like I said at the beginning, they're tough conversations. They're conversations that need to be had.
Yeah, I think we
Um,
need all, whether we have kids in school or not, although certainly if you have kids in school, this is really important for you, you know.
Absolutely.
And
What are we talking about next week?
but one more thing I want to say
Yeah,
is,
go ahead.
uh, I can walk into a school and within 15 minutes I can tell you whether this is a kind and safe school or not. I can just feel it. And you can, listening to the interactions of the students and walking down the halls and seeing how people are interacting with each other, I can tell you whether this is a kind of and safe school or not. And unfortunately, after creating materials and a whole curriculum, actually the curriculum involves at least 5 major interventions to create a kind and safe school. It's not something you do overnight. And I usually ask schools to take at least a year to implement the program. And I'll talk more about that. But next time, I want to talk more about what are the school shooters like? What's a profile about school shooters? And there's some unique things. Obviously, they're similar to the mass shooters in some ways, but there's also some unique things about school shooters that I think we all need to know. So that's what I'm going to talk about next time.
Excellent. And if you're looking for those resources and any other resources that we ever talk about here, go to circle.org, click the link in the description of this episode, and you can check out all of that stuff. You can also check out Dr. Weinhold's new book and the other 79 other books that he's written.
Yeah, well,
So,
the play is for sale on the website.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. So click.
And you buy one copy of it, and it's really cheap. And then you can make copies for everyone who would want to perform in that play. All the characters can get their own copy of the play.
You can't beat that. As somebody who used to produce theater, you literally can't beat that.
Right.
So thank you so much, Dr. Weinhold. We'll see you next week on Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Good to chat with you. Good. See you next week.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.